"Where did you get that fake card?" The voice sliced through the silence of the hotel lobby like a blade. The black card fell to the marble floor, glinting under the chandelier, before being crushed beneath a polished Oxford shoe. Trevor Blake, the night manager of the Regency Crown Manhattan, bent down and slowly twisted his toe, as if extinguishing a cigarette with deliberate contempt. "Get your ghetto ass out of my hotel," he said, loud enough for everyone in the lobby to hear. A snicker escaped from behind the front desk. Emily Sosa, a rookie receptionist, watched the scene with a mix of fear and curiosity. "Should I grab the mop?" she asked, half joking, half trembling. "That card looks dirty anyway." Standing before them, Naomi Carter didn't move. No frown, no defense. The digital clock above the counter cast its cold glow across her face. 11:47 at night, the exact moment 2 hotel employees unknowingly wrote the final lines of their careers. In her simple white blouse, slightly faded jeans, and worn sneakers, Naomi looked like any ordinary traveler. But in her eyes, deep, calm, and quietly sorrowful, there was something that made people uneasy, the power of composure. She bent down, picked up the crushed Centurion card, brushed the dust off with her sleeve, the cold metal now warm from Trevor's shoe print. She slipped it back into her old leather bag and looked up. "I have a reservation for the penthouse," she said softly but firmly. Trevor snorted. "Anyone can fake an email, you know." Naomi opened her phone, showing the glowing screen. Regency Crown, Manhattan, penthouse suite. Number 5201, guest Naomi Carter. He glanced at it and smirked. "Nice Photoshop." "You think we're stupid?" Behind him, Emily pretended to type. "I'm checking the system," she murmured. "There's a Naomi Carter in the list, but—" She hesitated, eyes darting between Naomi and Trevor. "It can't be her." "Can't be her?" Naomi asked, her tone steady. "Well," Emily stammered, "the real one would look different, more important, more refined." Trevor leaned against the counter, lips curling into a grin. "Let me be clear, Miss Carter. This is a 5-star hotel. We host CEOs, politicians, Hollywood stars, not people who look like they just walked out of a Walmart parking lot." Naomi glanced at her watch. 11:52. Only 8 minutes left before her online meeting with Tokyo, a $200 million deal, 6 months of negotiation, waiting only for her approval. She exhaled quietly. "I just need to check in. It'll only take a few minutes." Trevor laughed, his voice cutting through the air like glass. "You think you're busy? I've got all night to teach you what reality looks like." The air in the lobby grew heavy. Eyes turned toward them from every corner. An elderly couple in evening attire turned away, whispering. A man in an Armani suit stopped his phone call and frowned at the scene. From the far corner, a young woman named Grace Nguyen, waiting for a friend, quietly opened her phone camera and began live streaming. "Guys," she whispered, "this is straight-up racism happening right now at the Regency Crown Manhattan. Look." On her screen, viewers poured in 47, 89, 156 and climbing. Trevor carried on his performance, his arrogance swelling. "I've worked luxury hospitality for 8 years. I can tell someone's class the moment they walk in. You know what your shoes tell me." Naomi looked down at her white sneakers, a bit dusty. "They tell me you ride the bus. You shop at thrift stores. You've never stepped foot in a place like this unless you were cleaning it." Emily giggled, hiding her mouth. "You're so mean, Trevor," she whispered. "But you're not wrong." Naomi opened her bag slightly. Inside a glimpse of a first-class ticket from JFK to Tokyo, and the corner of the black Centurion card. She looked up, her eyes steady. I understand you're busy, but I really do need to check in. Trevor sneered and stepped closer. This isn't a community center. This is private property. Mine. The office door behind the desk swung open. Linda Park, the assistant manager, emerged, holding a stack of papers. Trevor called out loudly, "Linda, we've got a fraud here." Linda looked Naomi up and down her face, hard with disdain. "Identification government ID," she demanded. "If you can really afford a $2,800 penthouse suite, prove it." Naomi handed over her ID. Linda held it up to the light, sniffed it, even scratched it. "Could be fake," she declared loudly for everyone to hear. "Trevor, should we call the police?" Trevor nodded and pulled out his phone. "Chicago PD. No New York PD. We've got a suspect attempting to scam her way into the hotel. On the clock, 11:54. 6 minutes left." 6 minutes before the world outside called her name, and the world inside this hotel collapsed. Naomi watched Trevor act for the crowd eyes darting to find an audience. To him, this wasn't about protecting rules. It was a stage for power. She knew his kind men, who made others feel small to make themselves feel big. Behind him, Emily whispered, "Should I cancel the penthouse booking? Give it to someone else?" "Go ahead," Linda replied coldly. "No need to hold the room for someone who can't pay." Naomi's phone buzzed a message from her assistant. "Yamamoto Industries will call in 6 minutes. Conference room ready. Are you ready?" She nodded to herself. "I'm ready." Trevor snapped his fingers. "Michael, get over here." A security guard appeared. Michael Ortiz, mid-30s, his expression stern but uncertain. "What's going on?" he asked. "She's trying to scam us," Trevor said. "Fake ID, fake card, the works. I want her escorted out." Michael looked at Naomi. Something in her gaze made him pause, something familiar, unsettling. He frowned slightly. Naomi met his eyes. "Before you do anything, I suggest you read the Employee Handbook section, 14.3. Trevor chuckled. "Oh, she's pulling the lawyer act now. Watch too much YouTube, huh?" Grace held her phone steady, whispering to her viewers. "Oh my God, this is really escalating. The viewer count hit 1,800, then 2,000. Comments flooded in. "Keep recording, tag CNN, hashtag Regency Crown Racism." No one in the lobby realized that in just 6 minutes, every fate in that room and the reputation of this hotel would change forever. Naomi stood silently still as the calm before a storm. The chandelier light glinted off the black card inside her bag, the symbol of power they had just trampled. And in that moment, her silence spoke louder than any defense in the world. The clock ticked to 11:55 at night. 6 minutes left. 6 short minutes, but enough to expose an entire system rotting from within. Naomi Carter still stood there in the middle of the Regency Crown Manhattan lobby, where the golden lights gleamed across the marble floor, shining as if everything in this place had been polished with arrogance. Trevor Blake was still talking loudly on the phone, his voice theatrical. "Yes, the suspect is female, around 30, dark-skinned, dressed poorly, trying to check in with fake documents. Possibly has a record. Yes, we're detaining her." He made sure to speak loudly enough for the waiting guests to hear, to show he was doing the right thing. In the corner, Grace Nguyen, the girl live-streaming, whispered to thousands of viewers, "He's calling the police. She's just trying to check in. Everyone share this hashtag, Regency Crown Racism." The viewer count shot up 2,500, then 3,200. Linda Park leaned over the counter, her gaze sharp as a blade. "Still pretending. If you really had money, You wouldn't be wearing shoes with worn-out heels. Emily Sosa stood nearby, forcing a nervous laugh. She knew this was wrong, but she was afraid of Trevor. She thought, if I stay quiet, I'll be safe. But deep down, shame crept in, that burning feeling of watching something wrong and doing nothing. Naomi unlocked her phone. A reminder flashed across the screen, Yamamoto Industries calling in 5 minutes. She took a slow breath. "Trevor," she said softly. "If I'm right, what will you do?" Trevor raised an eyebrow. "If you're right, I'll apologize." "No. You'll have to change." "Ha, who do you think you are?" He laughed arrogantly. "I'm the one who decides who belongs here." The door behind him opened. Michael Ortiz, the head of security, stepped forward. He was the kind of man who had seen everything drunks, thieves, fights. But what he saw now made him pause. Naomi looked at him, not angry, not afraid, only certain of where she stood. "Michael," she said calmly, "do you have your employee handbook?" He frowned. "Yeah, on my phone." "Then please open section 14.3. Trevor folded his arms and scoffed. "Oh great, she's playing lawyer now." But Michael opened it anyway. His eyes skimmed, then stopped. The line was clear. Any act of discrimination based on race, gender, or economic status will result in immediate termination without severance. He looked up, his expression changing. "Trevor, you know this rule," Trevor snapped. "Of course I know. But this isn't discrimination. I'm protecting hotel property." Linda jumped in. "She's a fraud." "Can't you see that?" Naomi smiled, not bitterly, but with quiet sadness. "What's truly frightening," she said, "is that you don't even realize you're discriminating." She stepped forward and placed her phone on the counter. On the screen was her booking confirmation, along with a chain of emails titled "Audit Visit Confidential Manhattan Property." Linda squinted. "Audit visit, who sent you?" "That corporate," Naomi replied gently. The answer made Michael freeze. Trevor, however, laughed harder than ever. "Corporate. You think I'm stupid? I've worked here 3 years. If corporate inspectors were coming, they wouldn't look like you." His laughter echoed across the cold marble. At that moment, Grace looked up from her phone and gasped. "Oh my God, it's going viral. Over 4,000 people are watching. They're tagging news outlets." Michael turned to Trevor. "You should stop. This is getting out of control." "Out of control!" Trevor roared. "I control this place." Linda leaned forward and snatched Naomi's phone. "Let me see that fake email." She scrolled, her eyes widening. The company logo was correct. The internal email address matched the formatting perfect. But instead of admitting it, she raised her voice, as if shouting would make her wrong sound right. "Fake, it's all fake, clever, but still fake." Because if it were real, then she faltered. Then she'd have to be. Naomi met her eyes. Be who Linda fell silent. On the live stream, comments poured in. "Check the system, they're done for." She's so calm. That manager is unbelievably arrogant. Trevor wiped his sweat with a napkin, still trying to keep his posture. "I'll call the regional director." "You'll regret this nonsense." Linda's phone buzzed. She glanced down and her face went pale. "Trevor," she whispered, "there's an email from corporate." "So what?" The subject line says, "Urgent social media incident, Manhattan location." He snatched the phone, reading quickly, his face draining of color with every word. "We are monitoring social media. Please report immediately any incident involving discriminatory behavior at the Manhattan branch." Trevor stammered. "No way. How could they know this fast?" A voice came from across the room. "Because the whole city's watching." Everyone turned. A young man in a business suit stood near the entrance, briefcase in hand. "Sorry to interrupt," he said calmly, "but you're live right now. Thousands of people are watching you treat a woman horribly just because of how she looks." Trevor gritted his teeth. "Who are you? I'm a guest. Room 2810, and I'm embarrassed to be staying here." Naomi glanced at the clock. 11:57 at night. 3 minutes left. Linda was still reading the latest message aloud, trembling. "Corporate demands an immediate report on the discrimination incident that's trending. Hashtag Regency Crown Racism is now top 5 in New York." Michael looked down at his phone, his face tightening. "Trevor, she's telling the truth." Section 14.3. Immediate termination for discrimination, no severance. She knew the policy before I did. Trevor's face flushed with anger. "I don't care, I'm in charge here." "No," Naomi said softly, her voice steady, yet resonant. "You only think you are." A strange silence fell over the lobby. The soft background music faded, replaced by the sound of everyone's heartbeat. Every person there could feel something about to explode. Linda's voice trembled. "Trevor, maybe we should stop. Corporate really is watching." "No. No one talks down to me in my own hotel. I've worked here 3 years and never had a complaint," Emily whispered. "That's not true, there've been complaints." Trevor snapped around. "What I saw them in the system. 17 complaints in the past 6 months, most of them about you." The air froze. Only the ticking of the clock remained. 11:58. Naomi set down her bag and opened it. Inside was a neat black folder, embossed with the Regency Crown Hotel's logo. She slid it gently toward Michael. "Would you please read the first line?" Michael opened it and read aloud, his voice clear and firm for everyone in the lobby and for the thousands watching online. "Internal Audit, Regency Crown Manhattan. Lead Investigator Naomi Carter." The entire room fell silent. Trevor stood frozen, his mouth open, but no words came. Linda stepped back, trembling, and Naomi, the woman they had mocked and humiliated for over half an hour, simply lifted her head, her eyes cold and brilliant like crystal. 11:59 at night. 1 minute before Tokyo called, and 1 minute before their entire illusion of power came crashing down, Naomi smiled. Now she said, "Let's find out who truly owns this place." 11:59 at night. Only a few seconds left yet. In those seconds, every sound in the Regency Crown lobby seemed to dissolve. No more low hum of the air conditioning. No more heels on marble. Only a dense silence, the kind that takes the shape of shame. At the front desk, Naomi Carter gently set her leather case on the counter, each motion slow, precise, and commanding, the kind of authority that does not need to shout or threaten, only to know exactly who it is. Trevor Blake was still there, his face pale as paper eyes, flicking from the sheet in Michael Ortiz's hand to Naomi, then around the room, as if hunting for an exit. But every gaze in the lobby was fixed on him, the eyes of dozens in the room, and tens of thousands more on Grace's live stream. Internal Audit, Regency Crown Manhattan. Lead Investigator Naomi Carter. The words cut like a cold blade through the arrogant shell Trevor wore. "No way," he stammered. "No, you're just a guest." Naomi did not reply. She opened the case and pulled out another file, heavy pages, landing on the counter with a hard, chilling thud. I think she said evenly, "It is time we reviewed the night shift performance in Manhattan." The large screen behind the desk flickered on. Naomi connected her laptop and pressed play. A slide appeared. Operational Audit, Regency, Crown Manhattan. Q4 report, revenue, guest satisfaction, and internal personnel assessment. Trevor stepped back. You have no right, Naomi cut in eyes on the screen. I have every right, because I bought this group. A ripple of whispers spread across the lobby. Linda Park gripped the counter's edge, trembling. You mean you bought Regency Crown? Naomi did not look at her. She advanced to the next slide. Average monthly revenue down from $1.8 million to $1.2 million. Guest satisfaction, score 2.3 out of 5 stars. Annual turnover rate, 89%. The figures blazed against a black background, like hammers pounding the reputation Trevor had paraded. This, Naomi said, is the real story of this place. A luxury hotel that forgot people are not measured by clothing or skin color. Grace held back a gasp as she streamed. Viewers passed 10,000. Comments surged. She really is the CEO. They discriminated against their own owner. Trevor is finished, Naomi turned to Michael. Read this for me. Michael nodded, his voice deep and clear. Internal report, 23 formal complaints of rudeness, discrimination, and guest mistreatment in the past 6 months, all connected to night manager Trevor Blake. Trevor stumbled back, face blazing. I never heard about those. If they existed, someone would have told me, Emily murmured behind the desk. They did. 3 times. You told us to ignore them. Linda scrambled Ms. Carter. There must be some misunderstanding we never intended. Intended. Naomi's voice stayed soft, steel cold. You do not need intent to harm you, only need action. She stepped into the center of the lobby. The polished marble reflected her figure, no longer a simple woman, dismissed and mocked, but a symbol of composure and justice. Let me remind you, she said, looking straight at Trevor, at Linda, and at Emily, section 14.3 of the Employee Handbook. The one you forgot. I did not. Michael lifted his phone and read the clause again. Any employee who engages in discrimination based on race, gender, or economic status will be terminated immediately without severance and may face personal legal liability. No one dared breathe. Trevor shook. You cannot do this. I have a family. Naomi cut him off. And the people you humiliated, do they not have families? Do they not have dignity? Her voice remained low-threaded with sorrow and pride. Linda broke into tears. I'm sorry. I was just following Trevor. No. Naomi said you were following your fear, and that fear cost you your humanity. Grace tightened her frame on Naomi's face. Viewers climbed to 12,000. Comments poured in. This is a life lesson. She's not shouting, she's teaching. This is real power. Naomi turned her laptop to the final slide. Pending complaints, 3 federal discrimination lawsuits. Total financial exposure, $5.7 million if they lose. And after tonight, she said that number will rise because thousands have seen how you treated me. Trevor collapsed into a chair, shoulders shaking. What do you want? I'll do anything. Naomi met his eyes. What do I want? I want justice and change. Linda choked out Ms. Carter. If you give us a chance, I swear I will relearn. I will. A chance, Naomi said softly, is for those who own their mistakes, not those who search for excuses. She turned to Emily. And you, Emily, what do you think about what just happened? Emily stared at the floor. I knew it was wrong. I laughed because I was scared, because I wanted Trevor to like me. I did not think about the consequences. Naomi nodded. Good, because the first step to change is the courage to face your own fault. Then she faced Michael, voice slow and certain. You chose correctly. You refused to act blindly. You will help me rebuild this place. Michael stood tall. I am ready. Naomi glanced at her watch. 12 o'clock midnight. Her phone vibrated. The screen read, Yamamoto Industries, Tokyo. She answered without looking away from Trevor. Hello, Yamamoto-san. Yes, I am in New York. That is right. I am finalizing an internal audit. A brief silence. Yes, there is a problem, more serious than expected. But I have a solution. She ended the call and looked across the lobby. No one spoke. You have forgotten the purpose of this industry, she said. Hospitality does not exist to prove who is richer. It exists to prove who respects people more. Trevor gasped. What are you going to do with us? Naomi closed her case, her tone crisp and final. I will do what your superiors should have done long ago. I am terminating the entire night shift. Murmurs burst forth. Linda sobbed. Emily reeled. Michael clenched his fist and nodded, as if to affirm it was right. Naomi gave Trevor one last look. You ground my black card under your heel like trash, but what you truly crushed was not a card, it was dignity. She turned and walked away, no longer a guest who had been humiliated, but a woman who had reclaimed her humanity, and the humanity of everyone ever belittled for how they look. The elevator doors opened. Naomi stepped inside. In that instant, no one spoke. No one moved. On the large screen, one final line still glowed: audit conducted by Naomi Carter, majority shareholder, Horizon Capital. And somewhere in the city, the hashtag Regency Crown Racism kept surging, but this time, thousands added a new phrase. Hashtag the woman who owned the hotel. 12:01 a.m. The elevator doors closed, leaving behind a hotel lobby drenched in silence. But it was not the same silence as before. It was heavier, aching, filled with the bitter weight of late realization. No one moved. No one spoke. They simply stood there staring at the space where the woman had just disappeared, the woman they had dismissed minutes earlier, only to now realize she held the power to decide the fate of everything around them. Trevor Blake slumped into a chair. His collar was crumpled, sweat soaked through his back, and every ounce of arrogance, every trace of the luxury manager persona he had worn, had melted away, leaving only a hollow shell. Behind the counter, Linda Park gripped her phone, watching as the hashtag exploded on screen. Regency Crown Racism, 48,000 posts, then 72,000, then over 100,000 in less than 5 minutes. Outside, several local news vans had arrived. Reporters wearing press badges were interviewing witnesses. The scene had spilled beyond the marble walls of the hotel. It had become a public indictment. In the middle of the lobby, Michael Ortiz stood still, his face tense. He knew Naomi hadn't truly left. Someone like her never walked away before the battle was finished. And he was right. At 12:03, the elevator chimed. Naomi Carter stepped out her stride, calm, her leather case in hand. But this time she was not alone. 3 people in tailored suits followed behind her. A silver-haired man with thin glasses, Arthur Mills, the corporation's in-house counsel. A tall, brown-skinned woman, Kesha Williams, regional director transferred from Boston, and a communications specialist recording everything on camera. Naomi stopped in front of the front desk. She didn't need to raise her voice. Her tone alone made the entire room hold its breath. I just finished the meeting with our Tokyo partners. The deal stands as planned. But before I leave, we need to clean this house. Trevor sprang to his feet. You can't just do this right now. Naomi lifted a hand, stopping him. Trevor Blake, employee, ID 4417. I have in my possession 23 official complaints against you, 17 disciplinary warnings in your personnel record, and 4 failed retraining attempts. She paused for a beat. Would you like me to read each one? Trevor opened his mouth, but no words came. Everyone in the lobby stared at him, the man who once boasted that no one ever complained. Naomi turned to Linda. Linda Park, employee, ID 4260, 19 customer complaints, 7 failed mystery audits, and your service certification expired last April. Linda broke into tears. I know I'm sorry, I just followed orders. Naomi continued, her tone unchanged. I understand. But when an order is wrong, choosing to obey it is still wrong. No one is exempt from accountability. She nodded to Kesha. Record the time 12:05. I hereby declare the immediate termination of the entire night shift at Regency Crown, Manhattan. The words were crisp, but each syllable landed like a bullet, slicing through the air. Trevor sank back into his chair. Linda sobbed uncontrollably, and Emily Souza stood frozen, her eyes brimming with tears. Naomi looked at the young receptionist, her tone softening. And you, Emily? What do you think about what happened tonight? Emily's voice trembled. I know it was wrong. I laughed when I shouldn't have. I went along with it because I was afraid of being left out. But I don't want to be that kind of person. Naomi nodded slowly. Good. I don't need an apology. I need change. And I believe people your age still can. She turned to Michael Ortiz. Michael, I want you to stay. From this moment on, you're head of the guest advocacy team. Your job is to make sure every guest, no matter who they are, is treated with absolute respect. Michael straightened eyes firm with conviction. I promise what happened tonight will never happen again. Naomi looked around the lobby at the guests who had stayed to watch, some still recording, others too, ashamed they hadn't stepped in sooner. She stepped onto a small marble platform, her voice flowing through the air, steady and strong, like a river in motion. This is not the first incident, and if we don't act, it won't be the last. I want everyone in this room to remember one thing. Dignity is not a privilege, it's a basic right. Grace. The girl live streaming lowered her phone, tears shining in her eyes. Miss Carter, she whispered, how can you be so calm after everything they said to you? Naomi turned to her, looking at the young woman as if seeing her younger self. Because anger would make me like them, she said. But change only comes from those who choose to stay calm. From the main doors, the floodlights of news cameras poured in, half illuminating Naomi's face, in gold, half in shadow. That image would spread across social media within minutes, replayed millions of times with one caption. She didn't scream. She reformed an entire system. 12:10 a.m. Naomi opened her laptop and connected it to the large display. A new slide appeared on screen. Immediate reform plan, Regency Crown, Manhattan. Standing beside her, Kesha read each line clearly. Launch the Guest Dignity Initiative within 48 hours. All employees must complete unconscious bias and cultural sensitivity training. Every guest feedback report will go directly to corporate headquarters, bypassing local management. Audio-enabled cameras will be installed throughout public areas to protect both guests and staff from false accusations. Naomi continued. And from tonight onward, every shift will include at least one guest advocate, someone authorized to speak up for anyone treated unfairly. She turned to Michael. You'll be the first to take that role. A small wave of applause rose from the guests, then another, louder, until the room echoed with it. Emily looked at Grace, her voice breaking. I can't believe I'm witnessing this. I did wrong, but she still gave me a chance. Grace placed a hand on her shoulder. Then hold on to that chance. She just turned a scandal into a lesson. Naomi stood in the center of the lobby, surrounded by employees, guests, and cameras, and spoke the final words of that night, words that would be quoted across every social platform by morning. You once believed power was the ability to command others, but real power lies in the ability to inspire others to change. She closed her laptop and handed it to Kesha. I'm leaving this place in your hands. Begin at dawn. By the time the sun rises, Regency Crown must be a different hotel. Kesha nodded solemnly. I won't let you down. Naomi turned to leave. As she stepped through the grand doors, the night wind of Manhattan swept through her hair, carrying with it a strange blend of warmth and chill, the feeling of rebirth. She knew this night was not just the night she reclaimed her dignity, but the night an entire culture began to crumble. Behind her, in the golden light of the lobby, Trevor Blake sat motionless, the man who once believed he held power, now nothing more than a trembling shadow within the very system he once defended. And out there in the city that never sleeps, a new hashtag was rising like a second fire: Regency Crown Reform, the night dignity won. 6:07 a.m., Manhattan, New York. The sky had not fully brightened yet. Outside the Regency Crown, Manhattan, dozens of reporters had already gathered, camera flashes popping against the hotel's gold plaque. News tickers scrolled. CEO humiliated at her own hotel, Naomi Carter, the woman redefining power. Inside the lobby was no longer last night's battlefield. It was a construction site for reform. Technicians were installing additional cameras. IT engineers were configuring software to track guest feedback. Beside the front desk, 2 large whiteboards had been set up: Guest Dignity Initiative, Phase 1, and Cultural Reform Timeline. At the center, Kesha Williams, a brown-skinned woman with commanding presence, directed team after team, her voice crisp and ringing each order, like the opening beat of a revolution. We have 48 hours to do what this place has avoided for 48 months, she said, and I will accept no excuses. Behind her, Emily Sosa, the young receptionist who had mocked Naomi, stood quietly with a notebook. She looked different now, no more timidity, no more the glossy pretense from the night before. Her shirt was neat, her hair tied back. On her chest was a new badge: Probationary Staff Dignity Training Participant. Michael Ortiz walked over and handed her a coffee. Did you sleep? Emily smiled faintly. No. I rewatched the live stream all night. Every time she spoke, it felt like she was speaking directly to me. And what did you take from it? Michael asked. Emily met his eyes, steadier than before. That a smile at the wrong moment can destroy an entire person. Michael nodded silently and turned toward the doors. Outside, Naomi Carter stepped out of a black car leather case in hand. She wore a light-colored suit, her face bright, though clearly sleepless. As the automatic doors opened, everyone in the lobby paused. A brief hush fell. Then Kesha moved to greet her. Welcome back, Miss Carter. Good morning, Kesha. Naomi replied, gentle but resolute. Today we are not just fixing a hotel. We are correcting the way this world looks at dignity. She walked straight to the front desk. Emily stood at attention, her voice trembling but firm. Welcome to the Regency Crown, Ms. Carter. It is an honor to serve you. Naomi smiled. Good. Starting over from the greeting is the right first step. An emergency meeting began moments later in the ground floor conference room. 17 staff members, kept on provisionally, sat waiting in silence. Naomi stood at the head of the table with no microphone and no slides, only a low, steady voice and eyes that looked straight through. Last night, the world saw the worst of this place. This morning, I want the world to see the best. She set down 2 documents. One was a crisis report, dozens of pages, listing complaints articles and brand risk. The other was a rebuilding plan, just 4 pages, bearing a single title, Rebuild with Respect. We will not hide. We will be transparent. Every step of reform will be made public, so guests can see that we are not running from failure, we are learning from it. Beside her, Keisha opened a slide deck, mandatory 30 hours of unconscious bias training for every employee, a 24/7 hotline for guest feedback, connecting directly to the CEO's office partnerships with psychologists and human rights organizations to assess the workplace, a complete re-evaluation of all middle managers conducted by the very staff who report to them. A ripple of murmurs spread, but Naomi did not interrupt. She let the truth settle that from now on, power here would no longer be a one-way privilege. In the corner, Emily raised a tentative hand. "Miss Carter, what about the people terminated last night? What happens to them?" Naomi held her gaze for a few seconds. "They were handled according to policy. But if they truly want to change our career recovery program, remains open. No one is excluded from the chance to relearn how to be human." Applause broke out, uneven, but sincere. Kesha tilted her head. "You know, Naomi, this is the first time I've seen staff applaud a termination." Naomi smiled lightly, because for the first time they understand that justice is not retaliation, it is balance. Outside, New York's morning rushed to life, yet amid the bustle the Regency Crown became an unexpected bright point. Dozens of guests stopped to photograph the new sign by the entrance. "Dignity is non-negotiable." Naomi Carter, CEO, Horizon Capital. A CNN reporter interviewed guests as they exited. One woman said, "I used to worry about the rumors here, but this morning, the COO was in the lobby herself, checking the welcome process. That feels like a real difference." Near midday, Naomi walked the 20th floor corridor, the one she had nearly been barred from the night before. Sunlight filtered through the tall glass and spilled across the floor, reflecting her silhouette and a small new plaque mounted on the wall, in recognition of every guest's right to dignity. She stood before it for a long moment. In the soft light, her face eased, less the steely executive and more a woman exhaling after a long night of battle. Michael approached and stopped a few steps away. "Ms. Carter, a group of journalism students is waiting in the lobby. They want to interview you about last night." Naomi turned back with a small smile. "Bring them up. I will tell them the most important thing." Minutes later, 4 students entered, cameras in hand. The first asked, "What do you think made your story a global phenomenon?" Naomi answered slowly, eyes lifting to the window, where dawn now washed over Manhattan. "Because people realize that sometimes justice does not come from courts or politics. It begins in a very small moment when one person refuses to stay silent." The room stilled. Everyone knew she was speaking of that moment. She bent to pick up the black card, crushed beneath a shoe. Not angry, not reactive, just unwavering. She continued, "I do not need to be celebrated. I only want every employee in every hotel, restaurant, or store to understand this. Sometimes, the ordinary guest in front of you may be the one testing whether you still have your humanity." A young woman asked softly, "And if they fail?" Naomi looked straight into the lens. "Then we must make them learn again." That afternoon, headlines spread in unison. Regency Crown becomes a new symbol of corporate culture reform. Naomi Carter, from humiliated guest to the woman reshaping American hospitality. In the main lobby, Emily and Michael kept working. Grace Nguyen, the young woman who live-streamed last night, returned this time as a communications contractor for the company. As she set her camera, Naomi passed by, paused, and said quietly, "This time, Grace, do not just film the crisis. Film the change." Grace smiled. "Yes, ma'am. The world needs to see that." Naomi walked on, leaving behind the glow of light across the gold plaque, a simple line that an entire night had proven true. Dignity is non-negotiable. 3 days later, the storm in the media had yet to fade. Across social platforms, the hashtag "the woman who owned the hotel" continued to spread on TikTok, Twitter, LinkedIn, even on corporate forums. But at the same time, a new wave of a controversy was rising. She was too harsh to fire them on the spot. She's just using this for PR. Maybe it was all staged. Naomi Carter read the comments on her laptop, the blue light reflecting in her calm eyes. She didn't react, only sighed quietly. Across from her, Kesha Williams spoke with a voice hoarse from sleepless nights. "The media's split. Half see you as a symbol, the other half says you were out for revenge." Naomi closed the laptop and leaned back in her chair. Justice always makes someone uncomfortable. But if our goal is to be liked, we'll never change anything. Outside New York glowed bright. On the streets below, people went about their morning, unaware that just a few floors above a quiet revolution was redefining what service meant. Kesha was silent for a moment, then said, "Emily and Michael are doing great. They've led 3 training sessions already. Feedback's been incredibly positive." Naomi smiled softly. "I knew they would. That girl has a conscience. She just needed the right chance." The door opened. Emily entered, holding a stack of notes, looking nervous. "Miss Carter, there's someone who wants to see you." Naomi looked up, who Emily swallowed hard. Trevor Blake. The room seemed to tighten. The air grew still enough to hear the hum of the air conditioner. 5 minutes later, Trevor walked in. No tailored suit, no polished Oxford shoes. His shirt was wrinkled, his face hollow dark circles under his eyes from sleepless nights. Yet in his gaze remained something, not arrogance but shame, mixed with the need for redemption. Naomi gestured for Emily to step out, then turned to face the man who had humiliated her before thousands. "What do you want to say, Trevor?" He stood silent for a few seconds before speaking. I haven't been able to sleep. I watched the video from that night dozens of times. Every time you looked at me without saying a word, I felt so small I wanted to disappear." Naomi said nothing. Trevor took another step. "I've lost everything. My job, my reputation. Even my wife won't talk to me anymore. But I realized something I deserved to lose it all." His hands trembled as he pulled out a piece of paper. "I wrote a letter. Not to ask for forgiveness, but so I can start again." Naomi took it and glanced through a few lines, messy handwriting but sincere. "I used to think power meant judging others. Now I understand it lies in how we treat those who have nothing." She folded the letter and placed it on the table. "Do you know why I stayed silent that night?" Trevor shook his head. "Because I realized your words couldn't hurt me. They only revealed you." Trevor lowered his head, eyes glistening. "I'm not asking to come back. That wouldn't be fair. I just want to help, if there's any way to make things right." Naomi studied him for a long moment, then spoke slowly. "No one can erase their mistakes, Trevor, but they can use them to teach others. You can help me if you're willing to face the public." Trevor froze. "The public? You mean yes. I want you to appear with me at the next training session." not as a manager, but as a living lesson. He exhaled shakily. "You're not afraid people will say you're exploiting me?" Naomi gave a faint smile. "I'm not afraid of being misunderstood. I'm afraid people won't learn anything from it." 3 days later, the hotel conference hall was packed. All employees from the Regency Crown chain were invited to attend, virtually through large screens. On stage, Naomi Carter sat on one side opposite her, was Trevor Blake, the man who once embodied the arrogance of the system. The air was thick. Thousands were watching live. Naomi began, "Today, we're not here to talk about someone else's mistake. We're here to talk about what happens when a culture turns prejudice into policy." Then she nodded to Trevor. He stood, took a deep breath. "I used to believe that every guest should look like a luxury guest. If they didn't, they were a threat to the hotel's image. But that night, I learned the most expensive lesson of my life. Sometimes the way we treat those we think are beneath us defines whether we truly deserve our position." The room fell silent. No whispers, no phones, only the sound of a man stripping away his pride. Naomi stood and continued, "This is not a session of blame. It's a session of awakening. If he has the courage to stand here and face his mistake, then everyone out there watching this live stream can stop, look in the mirror, and ask themselves, have I ever acted like Trevor?" The question rippled through the room like a current. Some people bowed their heads. In the front row, Emily bit her lip, eyes glistening. Trevor spoke again, his voice trembling but honest. "I lost my reputation, but because of Ms. Carter, I gained something more valuable: awareness. If she had answered my cruelty with anger, I would have stayed blind, thinking I was right. But she chose silence, and that silence woke me up." Naomi nodded and turned to the audience. "That's why real reform doesn't begin with fear. It begins with honesty." The room erupted in applause, first scattered, then unified. Tears glimmered not out of pity, but from understanding. That afternoon, Naomi returned to her office on the 20th floor. She looked out over the flow of Manhattan's streets below. Michael entered, placing a report on her desk. Revenue up 18% in 3 days. Guest satisfaction at 4.5 stars. And over 200 job applications from people saying they want to work where people are respected. Naomi smiled. Not bad for a crisis. Michael hesitated. "Do you ever regret it? Not yelling back? Not retaliating? Not giving them the pain they gave you?" Naomi was quiet for a moment, eyes still on the city beyond the glass. "Of course, I wanted to scream, but if I had, I'd have made them fear me, not understand me." She turned her tone gentler. "Justice doesn't need noise, Michael. It needs light. And sometimes that light comes from the very person who was once stepped on." Outside, the sun climbed higher, its rays glinting off the hotel's golden plaque, engraved with the simple words the world was now learning by heart: "Dignity is non-negotiable." Naomi closed her eyes. In that moment, she no longer heard judgment, no longer saw angry comments. Only the quiet sound of a city beginning to change, slowly but surely. A revolution had begun. Not born from power, not from money, but from a woman who chose silence to make the world listen. 3 months later, the Regency Crown Manhattan had transformed completely. Every hallway, every smile, every greeting carried the breath of a new culture, one where respect had become the common language and dignity the highest standard. That morning, sunlight streamed through the glass walls, reflecting off the golden plaque in the lobby, in recognition of every guest's right to dignity. Beneath it was a small signature: Naomi Carter, Emily Sosa, was teaching 2 new employees how to welcome guests. "Don't just say, 'Welcome,'" she said, smiling. "Look at them with genuine care. They're not just guests, they're people who trust us." Today she was a supervisor after 90 days on probation. At the next desk, Michael Ortiz reviewed the feedback logs from the new Guest Dignity app. "Not a single complaint in 60 days, he said, half in disbelief. Really, Emily grinned. "Then we're doing something right." Michael nodded. "No, we're doing something human." On the 20th floor in her office, Naomi Carter was signing a new contract. Revenue up 34%, ratings at 4.6 stars, dry numbers. But behind them was quiet pride. The door opened. Grace Nguyen entered, now the head of social media communications. She placed her tablet on the desk. "Ms. Carter, the short video from our training program just passed 20 million views." And the top comment says, her voice trembled as she read, "She didn't seek revenge. She educated." Naomi smiled. "That's the comment I wanted to see most." Grace hesitated for a moment, then asked, "Do you plan to speak publicly about that night again?" Naomi shook her head. "There's no need. I've said enough. The rest the results will say for me." She stood and stepped onto the balcony. From there, Manhattan spread before her, dazzling like a living painting. "You know, Grace," Naomi said softly, "the night they humiliated me, I thought my world was collapsing. But it turns out that was the night it began rebuilding from the rubble." Grace was silent, her camera still recording. Naomi knew this clip would be shared, would spread online. But this time she didn't stop it, because she understood, sometimes silence deserves to be shared too. That afternoon, the hotel welcomed a group of hospitality students. Naomi had agreed to speak with them. She stood in the lobby beside the plaque that read, "Dignity is non-negotiable." "You ask me what kept me from getting angry when I was insulted," she began. "The truth is I was angry, but I chose to direct that anger toward the system, not the people. Because if we only punish individuals without changing the culture, then tomorrow another Trevor will appear." One student raised his hand. "And what about the real Trevor, Ms.?" Carter Naomi smiled. "He's working with us now, teaching unconscious bias awareness at other hotels. He turned his mistake into a lesson for others." The room filled with murmurs of surprise. Another student whispered, "It's like a story of rebirth." Naomi nodded gently. "Yes. Anyone can be reborn if they dare to face the ugliness within themselves instead of running from it." Night fell. When the city was quiet, Naomi stayed alone in the lobby. She looked up at the grand clock on the wall, 11:47 p.m. The exact time that fateful night had begun. She walked slowly to the same spot where her black card had once been crushed under a shoe. Now, in that very place, a small brass plaque had been embedded into the floor. Here stood a woman who chose dignity over anger. March 15th, 2025. Naomi knelt down, gently touching the inscription. In her eyes reflected the chandelier's glow and the echoes of everything she had endured, the humiliation, the resolve, and the light she chose instead. Outside the hotel's digital billboard played a short clip, her words from that first seminar. "True power is not in making others fear you, but in inspiring them to be better." Naomi looked up, smiled faintly, and whispered to herself, "And that is the real legacy." The next morning, CNN opened its broadcast with the headline, "Regency Crowned from Scandal to School of Humanity." Below it was an image of Naomi Carter, stepping out of the hotel sunlight, catching her hair, her face serene. When asked how she felt, she answered simply, No one is born knowing how to respect, but everyone can learn if someone is patient enough to teach. And beneath the report, the hashtag spread one final time, closing the story that had changed an entire industry the night Dignity won. 1 year later, the glass tower of Horizon Capital gleamed in the heart of Manhattan, reflecting the sunrise like a colossal mirror shining over the city. In the 42nd floor conference room, Naomi Carter, now not only a CEO but also a symbol of corporate culture reform, was preparing for the annual report presentation. On the massive screen were rows of data and growth charts. But what made the room erupt in applause was not the numbers, it was the final line that appeared: 0 cases of discrimination in 12 consecutive months. Naomi smiled and nodded gently. "Not because we are perfect," she said, "but because we have learned to listen while there is still time to change." The room filled with applause. In the front row, Emily Sosa, now regional front desk supervisor for the Northeast, quietly wiped her tears. She remembered herself 1 year ago, a trembling girl, hiding behind the counter, laughing at the wrong moment, afraid of being excluded. Now she was training hundreds of new employees, teaching them the same lesson she had learned through shame. Beside her, Michael Ortiz nodded with quiet satisfaction. Pinned to his lapel was a small badge reading Guest Advocacy Founding Team. From a security guard, he had become a leader in the guest rights movement across the entire chain. When the meeting ended, Naomi received a notification. Harvard University had invited her to deliver the commencement address for the business administration graduates. She paused for a few seconds, then smiled. At last, that story is no longer an incident. It's a case study. 2 weeks later, in Cambridge, Massachusetts, under the bright sun of Harvard Yard, thousands of students in black gowns listened as a woman stepped up to the podium. Naomi carried no notes, no teleprompter. She simply stood there, poised, calm, confident, and began to speak. 1 year ago, I was denied check-in at a hotel I owned. They didn't know who I was, and they treated me as if I was no one. The crowd fell silent. In that moment, I could have shouted. I could have sued. I could have destroyed them within an hour. But I chose to let them expose themselves, because there is no lesson deeper than the one we are forced to learn by looking at our own reflection. A soft breeze brushed through her hair as she continued. And you know what? When light shines on the truth, it not only reveals mistakes, it creates the chance to change. She paused, looking over the rows of young faces. When you step into the world, you will hold power, the power to hire, to sign contracts, to deny someone an opportunity. But never forget, power without compassion is simply abuse packaged as authority. Applause erupted. Many students stood, eyes glistening. One young woman asked Ms. Carter, what was the hardest part of that journey? Naomi smiled. The hardest part wasn't forgiving them. It was forgiving the part of me that once wanted to be like them, the part that wanted to respond with pride instead of grace. That line was recorded and spread across social media. Within 3 hours, the video titled "The Night Dignity Spoke" surpassed 10 million views. That evening, Naomi sat in a small cafe in Cambridge, the soft light casting a warm glow on the wooden table. She opened her phone and saw a new email. The sender, Trevor Blake. I just watched your speech. Thank you for giving me a second chance. I'm now running a program called The Human Factor in small hotels across Texas. Every time I share our story, I see my former self, and I see hundreds of others beginning to change. Naomi read it in silence for a long moment, then typed her reply. "Thank you, Trevor. No one can change the past, but we can turn it into a reminder for the future." She hit send, then looked up. In the corner of the cafe, a group of students were watching her speech on their phones, nodding along. One of them whispered, "I'm going to hang her quote in my future office." Naomi smiled. She didn't need to know if they truly would. It was enough to know the spark had been passed on. The next morning she returned to Manhattan. In the Regency Crown lobby, a group of African tourists were checking in. Emily greeted them personally, while Michael helped with the luggage. A young boy pointed to the golden plaque on the wall. "Mom, what does that mean?" His mother bent down and read aloud. "Dignity is non-negotiable." Naomi, standing at a distance, heard it and smiled, her eyes shining like someone watching the seeds she once planted bloom across the world. She turned to Grace and Nguyen, who still carried her camera. "Start filming again," Naomi said. "But this time not about me." Grace looked up, surprised. Then about who Naomi answered her eyes, resting on the smiling travelers. About everyone who was ever underestimated, but still chose kindness. Because that's the real story. Grace pressed record. The camera captured Naomi turning away, walking toward the doors as the morning sun wrapped her in golden light. On the screen, words appeared, slowly closing one story, but opening thousands more. One night can change a life. One right action can change the world. And below it, a single hashtag glowed like a promise that would never fade, the legacy of dignity. 3 years later. New York was still loud and restless, but in a quiet corner of the city, the Horizon Academy for Human Leadership officially opened its doors. The golden words engraved on the gate read, "Founded by Naomi Carter, to teach the power of dignity." The campus welcomed hundreds of learners, not executives but receptionists, security guards, nurses, teachers, and even those once dismissed because of prejudice. They came to relearn something that should have been simple, how to see others through the eyes of equality. Naomi walked slowly down the hallway, sunlight streaming through the glass windows, each step echoing like the heartbeat of a new beginning. 3 years enough time to turn a scandal into a living philosophy, spreading across the world. In the first classroom, Emily Sosa, now a lead instructor, stood before 60 students. The day I laughed at a guest, she said, "I thought I was following workplace culture." But in truth, I was killing my own. The room was silent. Emily smiled, her gaze steady, no longer the trembling girl behind the counter she once was. At the back of the class sat Trevor Blake. A simple shirt, calm eyes, quiet presence. He was now a guest lecturer teaching the psychology of bias. When Emily finished her talk, he stood and spoke softly. Prejudice is not something we choose to have or not to have. It lives within us like darkness, waiting for light. The question is, are we brave enough to switch it on? The class burst into applause. From the window, Naomi watched and smiled faintly. The light had stayed. By noon, reporters had arrived for interviews. One journalist asked Ms. Carter, "What makes you believe a small story can change the entire world?" Naomi replied with calm conviction. "Because the world doesn't change through policies, but through the moment people realize that respect is an instinct worth nurturing." The reporter pressed further. "If you could go back to that night, would you do anything differently?" Naomi's eyes softened, reflecting the light. "No. I would still stay silent, and I would still pick up that black card. Because sometimes one small act, not to seek revenge, but to restore decency, is enough to change the course of history." As the afternoon breeze swept through the small garden behind the academy, a bronze statue stood amid the green lawn depicting Naomi bending down to pick up the fallen card. At the base, an inscription read, "The moment dignity was picked up from the floor." A group of young students gathered around it in quiet reflection. One brown-skinned girl whispered, "I used to be treated badly at work. But because of her story, I didn't quit. I came back to change how my profession treats others." Her friend smiled. "So that's what it means when one woman stands up, the whole world can rise with her." Naomi heard them, but didn't interrupt. She simply stood at a distance, hands clasped, eyes glistening. She knew this was no longer her story. It had become a flame, passed from one hand to another, from one generation to the next. As the sun set, its golden hue bathed the statue in light. Naomi returned to her office and wrote the final words in her journal. "I don't need to be remembered as a CEO. I only wish to be remembered as the woman who picked dignity up from the floor and gave it back to the world." She set down her pen and smiled. Outside, the academy's bells rang long and clear, echoing across Manhattan, a quiet reminder that the light born on that night had never gone out. 5 years later. Night had fallen over Manhattan, yet the glass tower of the Horizon Academy still glowed brightly against the dark sky. Inside the grand auditorium, hundreds of students gathered to celebrate the 5-year anniversary of the Dignity Initiative, a program that had now reached more than 40 countries and been recognized by the United Nations as a global model for human dignity education. Naomi Carter stood behind the curtain, no longer the center of attention, only an observer. On stage, Emily Sosa, now the Academy's executive director, spoke with heartfelt emotion. That night, a single small act, a woman bending down to pick up a trampled card, made millions lift their heads and look inward. The room was silent, then erupted into applause. A spotlight illuminated the bronze statue at center stage, Naomi forever captured in that moment, bending down eyes, resolute hands, gently lifting the card as if holding something sacred. In the back row, Trevor Blake sat beside his wife and daughter. His life had become simpler, but richer in meaning. He squeezed his daughter's hand softly and whispered, "That's the woman who gave your dad a second chance." The little girl looked up with bright eyes. "Daddy, I want to grow up to be like her." When the ceremony ended, Naomi stepped into the corridor, where the night wind drifted through the glass walls. Outside, the city lights shimmered on the Hudson River, glittering like 1,000 fragments of memory. She heard footsteps behind her. It was Emily. "Ms. Carter," Emily said gently. "Everyone's asking if you'll say a few words to close the ceremony." Naomi turned her smile, kind, tired, yet radiant. "No need. My words don't matter anymore. The world is speaking for itself now." She placed a hand on Emily's shoulder. "From here on, it's your generation's turn. Don't let this flame go out." Emily nodded, eyes glistening. "You already taught us that, Ms. Carter, that power doesn't live in a title but in the way you make others feel seen." Naomi nodded softly. The light from the stage spilled into the hallway, wrapping her face in a gentle golden glow. That night, as she left the academy, Naomi walked along the riverbank. The city still roared around her, but within her was a rare stillness. Across the Hudson, the reflections of lights danced like memories she had already made peace with. On the giant screen in Times Square, an old video began to play her voice from years ago. One night can change a life. One right action can change the world. Naomi stopped and looked up at her younger self, then smiled. She knew this story didn't end here. Because when dignity is passed on, it is never lost. It becomes light guiding those still searching in the dark, and in this city that never sleeps, that light remains awake. From the perspective of a cultural and leadership expert, Naomi Carter's story is not only about justice, it is proof that dignity is the universal language of humanity. When we choose respect over judgment, the world around us begins to change, not loudly, but profoundly. If you believe that compassion can redefine power, please like and subscribe to help spread that message. And before you leave, share your thoughts in the comments. Keep your dignity.